There's a system. You were born into it. You follow its rules. You trust its promises. But what if the system is the very thing holding you back? In Escape the System, Joe Barnes exposes the invisible chains that bind us and shows how to break free. This is your wake-up call.
Hello, everyone. Hi, all. Welcome to BookPodCastZone. I'm Emma, your enthusiastic guide for today.
And I'm John, ready to do some analytical synthesizing.
We are so excited today. We're about to launch into, well, what feels like one of the most transformative blueprints we've looked at in a while.
Absolutely. Today is all about an in-depth exploration, a real deep dive into Joe Barnes' guide to unbound living. You, the learner, you've given us this fantastic source material, and we're going to meticulously pull apart his 7-chapter blueprint. It's essentially a plan for personal revolution.
Yeah, it really is. And our mission today is pretty clear. We want to extract the absolute core insights, those emotional turning points, and maybe most importantly, the actionable steps from this really powerful work. We're aiming to turn that sort of passive question, what if I could escape, into practical instructions. Like, okay, here is how you actually break free.
And Barnes's work feels particularly relevant right now, doesn't it? It really tackles that modern feeling, that sense that we're constantly running on a treadmill.
Right. A treadmill designed and controlled by someone else. It's pervasive.
Exactly. So let's just jump straight in. We need to start with the foundation of his argument, which is chapter 1.
Okay, chapter 1, the grip of the invisible cage. Sounds ominous.
It is, in a way. Barnes starts by really dismantling the traditional view of oppression, I guess. He argues the biggest system isn't external, not primarily. It's not the government. It's not big corporations necessarily.
So what is it then?
It's the quiet voice inside, the one that governs our choices, usually based on fear or, seeking external approval.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit more. He defines this system not as some, distant machine.
Right, not a physical thing.
But as this quiet, insidious voice promoting conformity. How does a voice get so much power over our actual real-world decisions? Like our jobs, our money?
Well, it gains power by whispering that our dreams, our real desires, are just too risky. The system, as he describes it, it thrives on predictability. It rewards compliance, sticking to the script with this illusion of security.
Ah, the illusion of security. Okay.
And that quiet voice,
Yeah.
It's the enforcer. It makes sure you adhere to the expected life script. You know the one, the sensible college major, the good job title, the normal amount of debt.
The path of least resistance, supposedly?
Exactly. But the crucial point Barnes makes is that this script isn't designed for your happiness. It's designed for the system's smooth operation.
And when we follow that script, blindly maybe, what's the outcome? What's the diagnosis Barnes gives?
The diagnosis is stark. It's modern burnout.
That resonates.
Yeah. Barnes argues, really compellingly, that society's accepted script, school, job, ladder climbing, doesn't prioritize fulfillment. It basically dictates exhaustion. He actually calls it scripted burnout.
Scripted burnout. Wow. So the outcome isn't real success on our own terms anyway.
Nope. The outcome is being highly effective at maximizing someone else's agenda until you just hit a wall. Burnout. Your utility, your usefulness to the system gets prioritized over your actual humanity.
We end up confusing all that activity, that busyness, with actual achievement. And that just keeps us running on that system treadmill.
Precisely. Which leads to the first step towards getting off it, awareness.
So if recognizing the trap is step 1, what are the key ideas Barnes gives us for this initial jailbreak, as he puts it?
Well, the very first part is what he calls the unmasking. We have to look directly, honestly, where this conformity comes from. He points to 3 main invisible chains. First, prescribed jobs paths we choose for status or safety, not real passion.
Okay, that makes sense.
What else? Second, external expectations. This is huge. Family pressure, what our peers are doing, those curated highlight reels on social media.
A tyranny of comparison.
Absolutely. And the third chain is what he calls the tyranny of shoulds. Every single time you catch yourself thinking, I should really do X, even though I kind of hate X.
You're reinforcing the cage.
You got it. You're tightening those invisible chains. So just spotting them, these chains of expectation, of self-censorship, that is the fundamental first step. That's the beginning of freedom.
That initial moment of awareness, it must feel like a bit of a shock, right? Maybe even that sinking dread you mentioned, followed by maybe relief. What's the emotional turning point he talks about here?
It's a really foundational emotional pivot. You move from that sinking feeling, that dread of realizing, wow, my life has been following this painful pre-written script, a feeling of powerlessness, really,
Yeah.
to this immediate, almost visceral spark of rebellion. It's the moment you stop asking, why is this happening to me? And you start asking, wait, who told me I had to agree to this in the first place?
Ah, reclaiming agency.
Exactly. That spark of recognition, even before you've broken any chains, just seeing them. That's the most critical realization in the whole process, arguably.
Okay, let's try and ground this a bit. Thinking about the U.S. landscape, say, right now in 2025, we talk a lot about the freedom of modern work, remote jobs, the gig economy.
Mhm.
We often think we've escaped the old 9-to-5 grind.
Right, but Barnes argues this is often just the system adapting, finding new ways to operate, not actually dissolving.
How so? Can you give an example?
Yeah, definitely. Take the U.S. gig economy hustle. Barnes would say it's a prime example of the illusion of freedom. Think about an independent contractor, maybe a freelance software developer, or a high-end graphic designer. On paper, they set their own hours, choose their projects. Sounds great.
Sounds like freedom.
But the reality, especially when you factor in things like ongoing debates around worker classification, like California's AB5 discussions, it gets complex. Those policies try to give contractors more protections by reclassifying them as employees, but sometimes that ends up restricting the very flexibility that drew people to freelancing in the first place.
So it's like the system is always finding ways to box you in, categorize, and control labor, whether you're technically independent or employed.
Precisely. And even for the truly self-employed, the invisible pressure is immense.
Yeah.
They're always on, constantly hunting for the next gig, managing fluctuating income, dealing with client demands at all hours.
The hustle becomes the new cage.
Exactly. And look at remote work. Yes, it offers geographical freedom, which is a huge plus for many, but it has also blurred those work-life boundaries almost into non-existence for some. There's this unspoken expectation of constant availability, hyper-efficiency, always being connected. Barnes argues this increased pressure, even though it's wrapped in the language of flexibility, is still the exact same fundamental trap.
You're still just exchanging your personal freedom, your time, your energy for what? Systemic utility and maximum output.
That's his point.
Huh.
The cage just got a nicer paint job, maybe a remote control door lock, but it's still a cage.
Wow. So if the system is so adaptable, so pervasive, how can we ever be sure we're not just trading one form of exhaustion for another down the line?
That is the core challenge, isn't it? Barnes insists we have to learn to really distinguish between intentional, meaningful effort work that aligns with us and just compulsory, systemic servitude. Doing work because we should. The reflection point for this whole chapter is really an urgent plea. Stop conforming. Stop playing a game designed for you to keep running, but never really win on your own terms.
It demands a kind of radical honesty, doesn't it, about what you genuinely want versus what the system, society, that inner voice want you to want.
Absolutely. It's about reclaiming that internal territory first.
That is a really powerful place to start. And if you're listening and nodding along right now, maybe feeling like you've just recognized the bars of your own cage, well, that's the crucial first step.
Yeah, definitely. And if this foundation, this whole idea has resonated with you, and you want more deep dives into these kinds of life-changing blueprints,
Then please do like, subscribe, and share for more updates. It really helps us keep doing this.
it does. Okay, so we've spotted the trap. Now let's talk about building the escape route. Chapter 2 is all about finding the fuel for that fire.
All right, Chapter 2, Igniting Your Hidden Fire. This feels like where we pivot sharply inward. Barnes seems to be inviting us to move from those quiet, maybe dismissed what-if, whispers, the dreams we sort of push away, to really embracing roaring passions. And crucially, passions that can actually be monetizable.
Yes, exactly. And this is a huge redefinition of value in his framework. Barnes frames this not just as, finding a side hustle you enjoy. It's much deeper. It's a thrilling rediscovery of your authentic self.
Rediscovery, meaning it was there all along.
That's his argument. For most people, he believes, their true passions, their core interests, got suppressed early on. Maybe they were deemed impractical or childish or just not serious enough by the system, by parents, teachers, society. Remember, the system needs compliant workers, often for roles that might be high status but are ultimately low satisfaction for the individual. It doesn't really want inspired creators challenging the status quo.
So reconnecting with that buried drive, it feels exhilarating because it's like meeting yourself again, before all the shit's piled on.
Precisely. Meeting your authentic self, unburdened by all that debt and duty we talked about. It's intrinsically motivating.
Okay, so practically speaking, how does Barnes tell us to do that? How do we unearth talents or passions buried under potentially decades of routine and obligation? We're all busy people.
He offers some practical sparks, some prompts. One method is what you might call deep excavation, looking back, way back sometimes to childhood or early adulthood. What activities consistently absorbed your attention? What did you do where time just seemed to disappear without needing any external reward or praise?
Play,
So
essentially.
yes, exactly.
Mm.
He encourages engaging in what he calls deep play activities with no set outcome, just driven by curiosity and enjoyment. But the most critical concept here, the game changer, is his economic argument.
Right, you mentioned this. Passion isn't just a luxury, a weekend hobby.
No, he frames it as the economic superpower. It's what truly differentiates you and drives real value in the modern economy.
Okay, that's a massive mental hurdle for so many people. We're constantly told, follow your passion, but have a backup plan, or worse, passion doesn't pay the bills.
Hmm.
How does Barnes explain the mechanism? How does passion actually generate superior market value?
He tackles that scarcity mindset head on.
Yeah.
His argument is that in today's world, hypersaturated markets, everything getting commoditized,
Mm-hmm.
the only true differentiators left are uniqueness and, crucially, intrinsic energy.
Intrinsic energy.
Yeah, the energy that comes from deep passion. If you genuinely love what you do, you bring a level of dedication, innovation, and sheer perseverance that someone just punching the clock for a paycheck simply cannot replicate. It's impossible.
And this energy translates into tangible results. How?
In several ways. Think about, say, product velocity. A founder who is dumply passionate about the problem they're solving. They'll iterate faster. They'll absorb critical feedback more readily because the mission is personal, not just business. They'll solve problems with way more creative commitment.
Because they care on a different level.
Exactly. And that higher level of care leads to superior product quality, a more authentic brand story, which in turn cultivates deeper customer trust. And people will pay a premium for that authenticity, for that quality born of passion.
So the market isn't just paying for your time or even just your skills.
It's paying for the unique, passionately delivered solution you provide. That high-octane energy, that intrinsic drive, is what fuels superior innovation and ultimately commands higher market value. He's really flipping the script on what valuable work means.
That alignment, when work feels like purpose, it must be incredibly powerful emotionally. What's the turning point he identifies in this chapter?
It's the shift away from that exhausting, often lonely pursuit of traditional security. Climbing the ladder on that predefined path towards the sheer exhilaration of pursuing something that genuinely makes your heart race.
So the fear changes.
The fear of conventional insecurity, like what if I lose this stable job, gets replaced by the energizing joy of being perfectly aligned. Work stops feeling like toil and starts feeling like purpose made manifest. It's a profound shift in your whole operating system. And this connects so powerfully with where we are right now in 2025, especially thinking about the huge shifts happening with AI and automation in the workplace.
Right. If AI can handle more and more of the algorithmic tasks, the predictable, data-driven stuff, the routine work, where does that leave human value?
Barnes basically provides the answer. Human value increasingly concentrates on those uniquely human capabilities, the things AI can't easily replicate.
Such a
Genuine creativity, complex emotional intelligence, nuanced contextual problem solving, ethical judgment,
Yeah.
and, critically, passion-driven work. If a task can be broken down into predictable steps and optimized by an algorithm, its long-term human value is questionable. It's likely heading towards automation.
So it's like, if a machine can do the predictable stuff, humans need to double down on the inspired, the unpredictable, the deeply human stuff. Your passion almost becomes a competitive advantage against automation.
Precisely. Your unique drive, your specific passion becomes the moat around your value proposition, protecting you from being automated out of relevance. Barnes reminds us, fundamentally, humans thrive on what feels alive, what has meaning, not just on churning out algorithmic production.
The system demands passionless compliance.
But the unbound life demands passionate creation. He really challenges you, the listener. Find the thing you would gladly do for free, the thing that lights you up, and then figure out the market need that requires exactly that level of unbridled commitment.
Wow. My big takeaway here is that Barnes is giving us explicit permission to finally access our own genius. It's not lost, it's not frivolous.
It's just waiting for permission to burn bright. And this chapter feels like The match needed to light that fuse.
A truly foundational chapter indeed. It sets the stage for everything else.
Absolutely.
And if you're finding this kind of clarity, these practical insights, useful as we unpack Barnes's ideas.
We'd again really encourage you to like, subscribe, and maybe share this deep dive. It helps us keep digging into valuable sources like this one for you.
Definitely. Okay, so we found the fire. Now let's dive into one of Barnes's most, perhaps, controversial arguments. Chapter 3 is where he takes on the whole culture of the grind.
Okay, Chapter 3. The myth of the grind. This is where Joe Barnes gets really aggressive, I think. He targets one of the most deeply ingrained and frankly toxic aspects of modern work culture.
Which is?
The constant, almost performative hero worship of hustle. That nonstop grind. He basically shatters the myth of the grind entirely.
Yeah, it's everywhere, isn't it? We've been trained almost since childhood that exhaustion is some kind of badge of honor. Proof you're working hard. Barnes directly attacks this endless, frantic doing.
He calls it the system's big lie. Barnes argues that relentless hustle, pushing yourself constantly without rest or reflection, it doesn't usually lead to breakthrough success. More often, it leads right back to the cage.
The cage of exhaustion this time.
Exactly. The cage of exhaustion, of diminishing returns, of total depletion. It's often just busy work disguised as progress. It satisfies the systemic demand for constant output, but it starves the human need for impactful, meaningful creation.
Okay, but here's the rub, right? If we're not grinding, if we're not hustling, aren't we just being lazy? That's a really serious mental hurdle for a lot of us. What's the counterintuitive strategy he offers instead?
It's a big one. He argues that balance decisively trumps burnout is the only sustainable strategy for long-term success and fulfillment. And key to this is understanding the crucial operational difference between two types of effort.
Which are
Forced effort versus inspired action. Forced effort is the grind that's pushing against resistance, using sheer willpower, often when you're tired or unaligned. Inspired action, on the other hand, is that natural flow state. It's operating within your zone of genius, the passion we talked about in Chapter 2.
And that inspired action, it feels different.
Completely. It allows for almost effortless creation, comparatively. It's how you build empires, he argues, without simultaneously exhausting your soul. It leverages creativity and alignment.
So he's actually advocating for embracing ease as a legitimate strategy, moving away from that old Puritan work ethic idea that pain equals productivity.
Yes, and this is crucial. Ease, in Barnes's framework, is not laziness, it's alignment. When you're aligned with your deep conviction, which we'll get to, and your passion, the work flows more naturally. Ease is the absence of unnecessary friction.
So less resistance means better results.
Exponentially better results, often, than sheer brute force effort ever could achieve. He suggests we need to stop celebrating the hours worked and start celebrating the quality of creative output and the velocity achieved during periods of inspired action. Focus on effectiveness, not just effort.
Okay, let's talk about the emotional side of this. Moving away from that constant self-flagellation, I'm not doing enough, I need to hustle harder, towards embracing ease. That must be a huge relief.
It's like the internal pressure gauge suddenly drops from the red zone. The emotional turning point is precisely when that deep, systemic frustration over not hustling harder dissolves. It just evaporates.
Then what replaces it?
Immediate, profound relief. It's like getting permission, maybe for the first time, to adopt smarter, easier methods that leverage your unique creativity over just putting in more hours. You realize all that discomfort, that constant strain, it wasn't actually necessary. You can be highly effective without being chronically miserable.
This feels intensely relevant to the U.S. context right now, especially with, say, the post-pandemic focus on mental health and the rise of wellness culture, slow living trends.
Absolutely. We're seeing a clear, large-scale questioning, if not outright rejection, of that old hyper-busy burnout lifestyle. And Barnes's ideas here are actually supported by emerging empirical evidence.
Like what?
Well, look at the corporate experiments happening right now in the U.S. We're seeing companies from tech startups in Boston or Austin to even some traditional manufacturing plants in the Midwest, piloting and sometimes formally adopting 4-day work weeks.
Right, with the same pay.
Often with the same pay, yes. And the results? Frequently, they report equivalent or sometimes even increased productivity and significantly better employee well-being.
Which proves Barnes' point.
Exactly. These trials suggest that mental clarity, adequate rest, and genuine inspiration are the real accelerators of valuable work, not just raw hours spent at a desk or on the factory floor. The sheer quantity of time becomes almost irrelevant if the quality of attention is completely depleted by that forced grind. Barnes was arguably ahead of the curve on this.
Okay, but let me just push back on that slightly for a moment. For someone who's just starting out, maybe launching a new business or project, doesn't achieving that initial breakthrough, getting escape velocity, doesn't that require some level of intense effort, maybe even sacrifice? Is the grind not sometimes a necessary tool, at least initially?
That's a really fair challenge, and Barnes would likely agree that the level of effort required for, say, a startup launch or a major creative breakthrough is often very high, yes. There will be long hours sometimes. But the critical distinction he makes is about the nature of that effort.
Ah, okay, so intense effort is okay if.
If it's inspired effort, not forced effort, if the sacrifice, the long hours, are driven by the genuine passion we uncovered in Chapter 2, it feels different. It feels like dedication, like purpose, even when it's hard. But it's driven primarily by the fear of systemic failure, by those shoulds, by trying to keep up with some external expectation. That's the grind.
And one builds momentum while the other leads to depletion.
Precisely. Inspired action refuels itself in a way. The grind just drains the tank. So this pivot, he describes choosing inspired action over forced grind, even when the required effort is high. That's the smart rebel's strategic edge. It's how you outlast a world that seems addicted to being unnecessarily busy and therefore often deeply inefficient.
That's a crucial distinction. Prioritizing the quality and alignment of effort, not just the quantity. Inspired action.
Exactly.
A powerful step. And if you're ready to ditch the brain-out cycle and start building with more ease and alignment,
Then you know the drill. Like, subscribe, and share for more updates. Because now we need to move into the really crucial inner work. Chapter 4 is all about the power of internal certainty, faith over force.
all right, chapter 4, faith over force. This feels like we're going deep into the realm of mindset, the internal landscape. Barnes seems to be explicitly flipping the script here, arguing that external success doesn't just happen, it actually follows from internal certainty.
Yes, he really elevates what many people might dismiss as a fluffy concept, belief, faith, and grounds it as a tangible psychological force, a tool almost. Barnes posits that sustainable success, the kind that leads to an unbound life, stems almost entirely from unwavering inner conviction, not just from luck or connections or even some mythical innate talent people think they lack.
So if you don't deeply believe your unbound life is possible, even inevitable, you'll sabotage yourself.
Subconsciously, yes. You'll hesitate at key moments, you'll interpret setbacks as proof it's impossible, you'll fail to see opportunities because your underlying belief system is filtering for failure.
Okay, he says belief is a force that can actually bend reality. That sounds pretty out there. How does he elaborate on that to make it actionable? How does it move beyond just like positive thinking platitudes?
That's the key. He grounds it in tangible mindset shifts. He draws heavily on psychological principles, things akin to applied cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, or even hypnotherapy concepts. The core idea is that your subconscious mind is like the deep operating system running your life. It makes thousands of micro decisions every day, totally below your conscious awareness.
Decisions
Like how you instinctively react to rejection, which opportunities you even notice versus ignore, how you talk to yourself internally after a mistake, the level of risk you're comfortable taking. It runs the show, mostly.
Okay, so if the subconscious is running the show, how do we reprogram it? How do we get it working for us instead of against us, based on old conditioning?
Conviction. Deep, unwavering conviction acts as the new blueprint for that subconscious operating system. If you internally hold a deep-seated belief, a conviction that your desired outcome, your success, your unbound life is certain, not just possible, then your subconscious literally stops looking for evidence of failure. It starts looking only for evidence of success. It starts actively filtering reality to match the blueprint.
And that changes actual behavior.
Dramatically. It results in very practical changes. You stop procrastinating on key actions because failure isn't perceived as a likely outcome. You suddenly spot opportunities that others miss because they were subconsciously scanning for risks and obstacles while you were scanning for pathways to the inevitable success. You approach difficult negotiations or conversations with an underlying certainty that changes the dynamic.
He shares stories to illustrate this.
Yes, he talks about classic American underdog stories. The small business owner who started with nothing, the tech founder facing impossible odds, people with minimal external resources who achieved massive breakthroughs. What did they have? Unwavering conviction in their vision, even when external reality looked bleak.
That distinction feels vital. It's not just wishful thinking, it's about actively programming your internal state, which then drives different external actions and perceptions.
Exactly. It's proactive mental architecture.
What's the emotional shift that comes with this kind of internal reprogramming? It must feel quite profound.
He describes it as intense self-liberation. The emotional turning point is when that heavy fog of doubt, the doubt the system often instills to keep us feeling small and predictable, finally lifts. And what replaces it is this unshakable sense of trust. Trust in yourself, trust in the process.
Like coming out of a storm.
That's the analogy he uses, yeah. Like stepping from a long, chaotic storm into warm, reliable sunlight. That constant internal war where you're fighting your own fear, your own second-guessing, it just stops. All the energy you previously wasted debating if it's possible is now redirected entirely into making it happen. Execution.
You can really see this principle reflected in, say, the huge rise of mindset coaching, manifestation apps, and related trends in contemporary America, can't you? Barnes seems to be giving that whole movement a more solid, perhaps more psychologically grounded, intellectual anchor.
I think that's a great way to put it. He takes the core idea and explains the mechanism. Think about those stories you hear. Countless founders in Silicon Valley or maybe Austin or New York who got rejected by investors dozens, maybe hundreds of times.
Yeah, the legends.
Right. Often their initial product wasn't even perfect, maybe far from it. But their conviction, it was absolute. They weren't just pitching a product. They were pitching an inevitable future they already inhabited in their minds.
And that belief kept them going.
Barnes shows how that unwavering belief system allowed them to maintain momentum when almost anyone else would have quit. Their eventual success wasn't because they faced no challenges. It was because their core conviction allowed them to reframe every single challenge, every rejection, every setback as merely a temporary data point, a redirection, not a fatal flaw in their destiny.
So belief isn't just a feeling. It's almost like the ultimate non-physical asset you can possess.
It really is. He makes the case that what you hold true internally isn't just wishful thinking. It is the concrete working blueprint that shapes your actions and ultimately manifests your external breakthrough. That's how Barnes makes belief a practical, powerful tool, not just a nice ideal.
Wow. Okay, another incredibly powerful tool for the escape artist's toolkit. And speaking of powerful tools, make sure you don't miss out on any of the insights from our future deep dives. The best way to do that is to make sure you
Yeah, hit that like button, subscribe to BookPodCastZone, and maybe share this with someone who needs to hear it. Your support really helps.
It absolutely does. Okay, prepare yourself now because Chapter 5 might be the most counterintuitive one yet. It's called The Art of Surrender.
Okay, Chapter 5, The Art of Surrender. This one is a bold challenge, I think, to almost everything conventional wisdom tells us about achieving goals. Barnes introduces this really radical concept. Gripping tighter, trying harder to control everything, often guarantees failure. After establishing the importance of passion and conviction, he says true freedom requires the ultimate paradox: surrender.
Whoa. Okay, that immediately feels terrifying. We're taught from day one that control equals safety. Control equals competence. You need a plan, you need to execute the plan, you need to manage the variables. Why does Barnes say control is an illusion, especially when you're trying to escape the system?
He delivers a really crucial analysis here. Control, he argues, is not only largely an illusion because there are infinite variables we can't control, but it's also a deeply counterproductive mechanism when you're fighting against the system.
How is it counterproductive?
Because the system actually wants you to exert that exhausting white-knuckle control. Why? Because that constant effort wears you down. It makes you predictable. It keeps you so focused on managing the tiny details that you miss the bigger picture, the easier path. The more you try to micromanage everything, the market fluctuations, what other people think, global events, your competitors' moves, the more energy you waste fighting forces that are fundamentally uncontrollable. You burn out trying.
Okay, I can see how trying to control the uncontrollable is exhausting. But if I surrender, if I let go of control, am I not just being passive? Doesn't going with the flow just lead to complacency, to drifting aimlessly? Where's the drive in that?
See, that's the critical distinction Barnes makes. Surrender, in his context, is absolutely not defeat. It's not passivity. It's a strategic power move.
Strategic surrender. How does that work?
Strategic surrender is about trusting the deep conviction you cultivated back in Chapter 4. It's about holding the vision, the what and the why, very clearly and strongly, but allowing opportunities and pathways to align themselves without that exhausting frictional fight over the how.
So you let go of needing to dictate every single step.
Exactly. You relinquish rigid control over the specific how and the exact when, and you focus all your energy on the core vision and on taking the next indicated step with inspired action, Chapter 3. You essentially liberate the massive amount of energy you were previously spending trying to force outcomes, trying to swim upstream, and you redirect it towards recognizing and acting on the opportunities that flow towards you when you're aligned.
Can you give us a more detailed, maybe a real-world example of what strategic surrender looks like in action?
Sure. Let's take a small business owner, maybe as someone here in the U.S., dealing with really complex supply chain disruptions, something that's been a huge factor in the mid-2020s economy.
Okay, very relevant.
Right. So the control approach, the white-knuckle grip, might be spending weeks, maybe months, frantically trying to force their usual overseas supplier, who's facing shutdowns or huge delays, to deliver a specific non-existent part. They're emailing constantly, making angry phone calls, trying to exert control over a situation they fundamentally cannot control. That's forced effort.
And it's probably incredibly stressful and yielding no results.
Exactly. Now, strategic surrender in this situation might look like this. The owner acknowledges, accepts, okay, that specific part from that specific supplier isn't happening right now. I release the need for it to be exactly that way. They surrender the method.
But not the goal.
Not the goal of delivering value to their customers. So they redirect all that energy they were spending fighting the unchangeable. Maybe they start innovating. Can we find a local alternative? Can we slightly redesign the product to use a different available component? Can we source from a domestic supplier even if it costs a bit more temporarily? They flow with the reality of the situation.
They adapt instead of resisting.
Precisely. That's surrender as a strategy. Not giving up the goal, but yielding the rigid attachment to a specific path, allowing the current of reality, the flow, to guide them towards a different, potentially even better solution.
Okay, that makes sense. That kind of letting go, especially after maybe weeks of frantic controlling, it must bring an intense emotional release.
He describes it as profound. That intense terror of letting go the detailed Gantt charts, the 5-year plans written in stone. It often crashes headfirst into this unexpected feeling of liberating flow.
Liberating flow. I like that.
Yeah. Barnes compares it to that trust fall exercise. You have to trust that if you step off the cliff of needing to control everything, there's an unseen safety net, maybe opportunity, maybe intuition, maybe just a better path waiting to catch you. The moment you stop fighting reality and start working with its actual conditions, paradoxically, the fear often dissipates. You realize the universe wasn't actively fighting you. Your own desperate fear of loss, your need for control, was fighting your success.
Thinking again about the context of the mid-2020s, with all the uncertainty we face, fluctuating housing markets, intense political polarization, those ongoing supply chain issues, climate anxieties, this chapter feels less like a nice-to-have philosophy and more like a necessary lifeline.
Its relevance is absolutely immense right now. Trying to personally control macroscopic forces like inflation rates or geopolitical events or the outcome of the next election, it's a direct recipe for crippling anxiety and powerlessness.
Because we can't control those things.
We simply can't. So Barnes essentially says surrender the need to. Strategic surrender becomes the method for navigating chaos with grace, with resilience. It allows you, the individual, to pull your focus back from the external storm, back to what you can control. Your internal state, your conviction, your responses, your alignment with your passion, your next inspired action. It renders the system's primary tool, fear of the unknown, fear of loss, much less effective against you.
Wow. So surrender, framed this way, isn't weakness at all. It's actually the ultimate power move against a system that relies on manipulating our fear of loss and our addiction to the illusion of control. It's trusting your inner compass over the external chaos.
That's it exactly. You nailed it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is heavy stuff. Powerful, but heavy. And we're already 5 chapters deep into Barnes's blueprint for breaking free. If this discussion is fundamentally shifting how you're thinking about control and success,
Then please do us a small favor and hit like, subscribe, and share for more updates. We really appreciate it.
we do. Okay, take a breath. Because now we need to talk about what happens when, despite all this, things inevitably go wrong. Chapter 6, Bouncing Back Stronger.
Okay, Chapter 6, Bouncing Back Stronger. Barnes is definitely a ruthless realist in this book. He doesn't paint this picture of, escaping the system as some easy straight line to bliss. He acknowledges up front. The path to a truly unbound life, while inspired, is going to include bumps, bruises, and probably some outright failures. Setbacks are part of the deal.
But he reframes them.
Completely. He argues that setbacks are not dead ends. They are not stop signs. They are crucial setups. Necessary plot twists, even, for your ultimate comeback story.
Okay, but that's easy to say intellectually. The system, our culture, conditions us to view failure as deeply shameful, maybe even as a definitive statement about our worth. I failed, therefore I am a failure. How does Barnes suggest we make that huge emotional and intellectual shift, especially when we're actually in it, when we've hit rock bottom?
It's not just about mindset. It requires practical tools for building resilience. And resilience, he argues, is built through process, not just spontaneous heroism when things get tough. He highlights two core strategies here.
What's the first one?
First is the strategy of deliberately celebrating micro victories, especially when things feel like they're falling apart.
Micro victories, like what?
Okay, say a massive project you poured your heart into completely fails. It crashes and burns. Instead of just focusing on the big failure, Barnes says, intentionally identify and celebrate the small wins within that process. Maybe you successfully delivered a really difficult presentation along the way. Maybe you learned a valuable new software skill during the project. Maybe you made a great connection even though the venture failed.
So you acknowledge progress even within the failure.
Exactly. These micro-victories serve as tangible proof that movement, learning, and growth are still happening. It directly defies that feeling of total stasis or regression that often comes with a major failure. It keeps momentum alive, psychologically.
Okay, that makes sense. Finding the forward motion, what's the second core strategy for resilience? You mentioned failure as feedback.
Yes, this is the absolute critical shift in perspective. It's about rigorously, almost clinically, reframing criticism, rejection, and even outright business failure as essential feedback from the market, from reality, from the universe, whatever language works for you, rather than taking it as a personal indictment of your worth.
He insists on separating the information from your identity.
That is the core distinction. If a venture fails, the system, and often our own inner critic, wants us to internalize it. You are a failure. Barnes demands we reject that completely. Instead, analyze the data contained within the failure. What was the flawed strategy? Was the pricing model wrong? Did we misjudge the market timing? Was the execution lacking? Treat it like R&D.
Extract the lessons.
Extract the lessons ruthlessly, and then this is key. Apply that learning immediately to the next attempt, the next iteration. Don't wallow. Analyze, learn, adjust, act.
That ability to detach from the shame, to see failure as just data, that must be the real fuel for persistence, for getting back up again.
It is. It builds psychological immunity to setbacks.
What's the emotional turning point described in this chapter? What does it feel like to truly integrate this resilience?
He describes it as a profound transformation. Moving from that paralyzing, maybe even despairing rock-bottom feeling after a significant failure into cultivating a resilient, enduring inner fire. It's the point where the scars from past failures stop being badges of shame and actually become sources of strength, of long-haul fuel.
How do scars become fuel?
Because you realize that having failed, having crashed and burned and survived, means you now possess valuable data, hard-won experience that others who haven't failed yet simply don't have. It gives you a unique perspective, a competitive edge even. It's the moment when the fear of trying again finally dissipates, because you know you can handle the fall. You've done it before. And again, we can draw really strong parallels here to modern American experiences, particularly thinking about entrepreneurial stories, maybe especially those post-pandemic pivots we saw everywhere.
Oh, definitely. Think about all the restaurant owners, for example, across the U.S. who, back in 2020, saw their entire business models just obliterated overnight. Dine-in shut down completely.
Total catastrophe for many. And many had to fundamentally abandon their old brick-and-mortar identity and pivot radically. We saw restaurants moving entirely to creating subscription boxes, launching national mail-order meal kits, offering virtual cooking classes online, things they never dreamed of doing before.
They had to reinvent themselves completely or die.
Exactly. And the ones who bounced back, who survived and even thrived, they didn't somehow avoid the initial failure. They treated that catastrophic loss, the closure, the lost revenue, as perhaps the most expensive but also the most essential research and development phase their business had ever undertaken. It forced innovation.
They use the failure as feedback, just like Barnes says.
Precisely. Barnes is essentially equipping you, the listener, to navigate the inevitable volatility of today's world, the wins and the losses, by making you psychologically immune to that paralyzing fear of starting over, or of trying something new that might not work out. Resilience, in his view, isn't about just standing still and taking the hit. It's about having an internal system, a mindset, in place that guarantees you bounce back stronger, smarter, and faster every single time.
My reflection hearing this is, These stumbles, these failures, they aren't arbitrary punishments being handed down. They're actually the necessary plot twists. They're what give your personal story, your eventual success, its depth, its texture, its authority, really.
And they provide the crucial experience needed for sustainable, lasting freedom. You learn what doesn't work on the way to finding what does.
Absolutely. Okay, this journey through Barnes's work is nearing its beautiful integrated conclusion. But before we get to the final chapter where it all comes together,
You know what to do. Remember to like, subscribe, and share this deep dive for more updates. Your engagement keeps us going. It really does. All right, let's gather the final pieces. Chapter 7, Crafting Your Unbound Life. This is where we become the architect.
okay, Chapter 7, Crafting Your Unbound Life. This is it, the grand finale. It's the integration chapter. Barnes essentially brings all 6 of the preceding concepts, recognizing the cage, igniting the fire, ditching the grind, harnessing faith, mastering surrender, bouncing back from failure, and shows how to weave them together. We move from intellectual understanding to embodied daily habit.
So the goal here isn't just escaping, it's actually building something new.
Exactly. Building a world, an environment, a life that is completely and authentically your own. Wild, wondrous, fulfilling, and crucially, sustainable. This chapter provides the practical tools to become the architect of that life.
Okay, so how do we take these powerful, but maybe still somewhat abstract concepts, passion, belief, flow, resilience, and actually construct something concrete, something solid that prevents that invisible cage from slowly, subtly rebuilding itself around us again? Because the system is persistent, right? It is persistent, which is why the key idea here is sustainable freedom. And achieving that requires meticulous, conscious architecture. It's not a one-time fix. It requires integrating all those previous lessons into daily, often measurable actions and habits. Barnes really emphasizes establishing specific rituals and routines that actively sustain the unbound state.
So these aren't just like productivity hacks.
No, they're deeper than that.
Yeah.
Think of them as preventative habits. They're designed specifically to keep the constraints, the mindset, the pressures of the old system permanently at bay. You're building new walls that protect your freedom rather than cage you in.
Okay, let's get practical then. You mentioned actionable blueprints, especially for maybe today's hybrid life hackers in the US, navigating remote work and all that. What are some of the specific architect's tools Barnes offers?
First and foremost, maybe the most critical in today's environment is intentional boundary setting. Fierce boundary setting.
Because the system thrives on blurred lines.
Precisely. Especially with remote and hybrid work. Those lines between work and life, productive time and personal time, they get incredibly fuzzy. The architect of an unbound life must draw rigid, clear lines. This means things like scheduling dedicated blocks of time specifically for that inspired action. We talked about deep work, creative pursuits, and then aggressively protecting those blocks. No emails, no meetings, no distractions allowed during that sacred time.
And protecting the end of the day, too.
Absolutely. Establishing non-negotiable end times for the workday, regardless of how flexible your schedule might seem. You need that psychic separation from the grind to recharge and maintain perspective. That's a crucial boundary.
Okay, boundaries are key. What else? You mentioned finances earlier. The system often maintains control through debt and dependency.
Yes, that's the second critical tool. Consciously designing financial independence structures. This isn't just about saving more money, although that helps. It's about strategically minimizing the leverage the system has over your life choices.
How do you do that?
Barnes urges things like diversifying income streams, so you're not reliant on a single paycheck from one employer who represents the system. Aggressively reducing or eliminating consumer debt is huge because debt keeps you chained to jobs you might hate just to make the payments. Financial freedom, even a degree of it, fundamentally changes your decision-making calculus. It allows you to make choices based more on passion and alignment and less on fear and obligation.
It sounds like Barnes is really advocating for a complete, deliberate redesign of not just your work, but your entire life environment.
He absolutely is. It's holistic. It could involve leveraging geographical freedom, for instance. If remote work policies allow you to live anywhere, don't just stay put by default. Consciously choose a place, a city, a town, a region that actively fuels your passion, supports your well-being, lowers your cost of living maybe, rather than staying somewhere that just reinforces old systemic constraints or keeps you in the comparison trap.
And maybe the most important tool isn't external at all.
Probably true. Perhaps the most crucial tool is the simple daily or weekly ritual of reviewing your alignment, regularly, intentionally asking yourself, is this action I'm about to take, this project I'm working on, this commitment I've made, is it serving my unbound blueprint? Or is it serving the system's old script? That constant check-in keeps you course-correcting.
Wow. Okay, so after all that work, spotting the cage, finding the fire, learning to flow, building resilience, setting boundaries, what's the emotional payoff? What does it feel like to reach this point of integrated triumph Barnes describes?
He portrays it as the highest emotional point of the entire journey. It's the culmination. It's moving from feeling like fragmented pieces of identity, juggling scattered efforts and obligations, into this sense of wholehearted, integrated triumph. Everything starts to align: your work, your values, your lifestyle. It's sealed, he suggests, with this powerful, quiet, internal surge of, I got this. True empowerment. You're no longer striving for freedom. You are fundamentally being unbound. Your external reality finally starts to consistently mirror the internal conviction you built earlier.
That sounds incredible.
Yeah, and importantly, Barnes doesn't leave you with like a rigid prescriptive map for exactly what your new unbound life must look like. That would defeat the whole purpose.
Right, that would just be a new system.
Exactly. Instead, he leaves you with the necessary compass, the principles, the tools, the mindset to navigate your own path, to wander free according to your own internal guidance. His final emphasis really hammers home the guiding principle of the unbound life. Your story, your rules, full stop.
Your story, your rules. A perfect place to land. We have moved through all 7 chapters of this really remarkable guide.
It's quite a journey he lays out, and if you, listening, found deep clarity or maybe some transformative inspiration in our discussion today,
Then please, one last time, consider liking this deep dive, subscribing to BookPodCastZone, and sharing it with anyone you think might benefit from hearing these ideas.
your support truly means the world. Hashtag outro, hashtag synthesis, and final takeaways.
Okay, let's try and synthesize this whole powerful framework from Joe Barnes.
Absolutely. He really takes us on quite the arc, doesn't he? From diagnosis right through to deliberate, conscious architecture of a new reality. We began by recognizing the invisible cage, that system of conformity, external expectation, and the inevitability of scripted burnout back in Chapter 1.
Right, seeing the bars.
Then we moved into the essential inner transformation, igniting your hidden fire, reclaiming that passion as an economic superpower in Chapter 2.
Then challenging the whole toxic culture of endless work with the myth of the grind in Chapter 3, learning to prioritize balance and inspired action over forced effort.
Followed by building that unshakable inner foundation with faith over force in Chapter 4, understanding conviction as the actual blueprint for reality.
That inner work then enabled the really strategic action phases, learning the counterintuitive power move in the art of surrender in Chapter 5, finding flow and navigating chaos by letting go of rigid control.
Which in turn fuels the resilience needed to reframe setbacks and failure as feedback in Chapter 6, learning to bounce back stronger every time.
And finally, integrating all of those pieces, using the architect's tools in Chapter 7, consciously crafting rituals and boundaries to build and sustain a truly unbound life.
The real genius of Barnes' framework, I think, is how the pieces interlock. How faith enables surrender, how surrender prevents burnout, how passion fuels inspired action, creating this virtuous, unbreakable cycle of freedom, potentially.
Yeah, it's very cohesive. And hopefully this detailed deep dive has provided you, our listener, with a valuable shortcut to really understanding these concepts thoroughly. We aim to offer not just what Joe Barnes says, but the deeper why and the practical how of escaping those systemic limitations he describes.
And it's crucial to remember, this framework isn't about a one-time dramatic escape. It's presented more as a continuous process, a lifelong practice of checking for constraints, noticing where the system might be creeping back in, and constantly realigning with your passion, your conviction, your own rules.
Okay, so as we wrap up, here is that final provocative thought we wanted to leave you with. It builds directly on Barnes' challenge to the system's reliance on our predictability. If the system, that internal voice, those external pressures, relies entirely on your predictable behavior, on your conformity for its survival and its hold over you, what is the smallest, most unconventional, perhaps even slightly rebellious action you could take tomorrow morning? Something that would be utterly unpredictable to the old system, the old you.
Let that question maybe percolate. Let it guide your very first tiny step outside the cage tomorrow. Go and find your answer.
Thank you all so much for joining us for this deep dive into Joe Barnes' Escape the System. We truly hope you take the compass he offers and begin wandering free on your own terms starting today.
Until next time, here on Book Podcast Zone.